Welcome to Maine Voices live stream. Before we begin, some messages from our sponsors. Stroud Water Lodge is an independent and assisted living community located just minutes from downtown Portland. Residents love the spirit of the lodge, enjoying the privacy of their own apartment and all the benefits of a full-service community with easy access to fabulous dining, entertainment, and shopping. Stroud Water Lodge is just a stone's throw from their sister community, Avita of Stroud Water, which focuses on memory care.
When you're out in the wild, or you're on the water, or you're looking at an island that was formed hundreds of thousands of years ago, you realize that we're only here for a flash of time. And you also learn, the older you get, if you're lucky enough to get old, is that it starts to accelerate really fast. We've had the privilege of working with some families for over 5 generations. So we know when someone is trying to make a decision about who to trust their legacy with, that it's one of the biggest decisions that they'll ever confront. We are disciplined investors and strategic family trust planners. We've managed wealth for generations, and we are grateful for the trust families have given us. This is patience. This is discipline. This is trust. This is H.M. Payson.
Good evening. I'm Allison McCann, Group Vice President of Business Development for the Portland Press Herald, and I'm delighted to welcome you tonight to Maine Voices live stream. And a special hello and thank you to our subscribers joining tonight. It's hard not to reflect that it's been about a year now that we moved these events to a virtual platform, but we are so glad that we could and that you have joined us along for the ride. In fact, this Sunday in the Maine Sunday Telegram will feature a story about the year in COVID, marking 1-year anniversary of Maine's shutdown. But also this Sunday, restaurant critic Andrew Ross is writing in Food what he's most excited to eat once restaurants fully reopen. So not just looking back, but looking forward too. Before we get started, I want to thank our generous sponsors who have supported this series for years. Hub Furniture, Stroud Water Lodge, and our presenting sponsor, H.M. Payson. Now, let me introduce you to tonight's host and guest. Amesel Ponte is a lifelong music fanatic who has been writing about music for the Press Herald since 2002 and has been full-time for 10 years. She's also the host of the local music show Music from 207 on 98.9 WCLZ and runs a music blog called AmeselOnTheRecord.com. Amesel has spent the last year missing concerts terribly and can't wait for the pandemic to end. In the meantime, she's thrilled to be able to write about Maine's vibrant music scene and is honored to be interviewing Sid this evening. Now, this isn't part of her official bio, but I will also share that in addition to all of her other talents, Amesel is also a very terrific trivia host. She hosted our company trivia night last week, and it was great fun, even on Zoom. Cidny Bullens is a musician, activist, and educator. Over a 4+ decade career in the music business, Bullens has worked with the likes of Elton John, Bob Dylan, Clark and Rod Stewart, and was twice nominated for Grammy Awards as vocalist on the Grease film soundtrack and the following year for the debut album Desire Wire. In 2016, Bullens debuted his one-person show, Somewhere Between, Not an Ordinary Life. The show has been performed in New Mexico, Los Angeles, Nashville, New York, and Maine. In 2019, the documentary short, The Gender Line, about Sid's life began screening at film festivals. Born in Massachusetts and now living in Nashville with his spouse, Bullens spent 30 years living in southern Maine and still visits his home on North Haven Island. Please welcome to the stage, Amesel Ponte and Cidny Bullens.
Well, all right. Well, I'm a little starstruck interviewing Sid, but I'm very thrilled. And as Allie said, I'm absolutely honored to be doing this interview with Sid. I am a fan. Here's my prop, the original copy of Desire Wire. And Sid Bullens, get ready, because this is your life that we're going to unpack. We have only an hour. And there's a lot to talk about. Your journey has been absolutely fascinating. We're going to talk about Elton John and Grease and your recording career and your life. There's some interesting things to unpack, including but not limited to, this says Cindy Bullens.
Yes.
Because up until a decade ago, your name was Cindy Bullens. You transitioned and now you are Sid Bullens. We're going to unpack that. Buckle up. This is very exciting. And guess what, folks? Sid has agreed to kick this off with a song. Sid, we are thrilled.
Here I am. This is called The Gender Line from my new album, Walking Through This World. So since we're talking about gender the line, if you were me, what would you do? You look in the mirror and it's not really you. You fumble around for something to wear. You feel invisible, you're not really there. Would you think you were crazy and out of your mind? You're not in your body, you're living a lie. There's a train in the station, there's a car in the drive, but they can't take me over the gender line. No, they won't take me over the gender line. I knew about a young man in my little town, kept to himself and didn't run with the crowd. Wicked secrets locked up in his head, a vicious monster hiding under his bed. There was no reason in anyone's mind what would possess him to take his own life. There's a train in the station, planes lined up to fly. They couldn't take him over the gender line. No, they couldn't take her over the gender line. Are you a boy or are you a girl? It's an easy answer in a binary world. There's a boat in the harbor, planes lined up to fly. They can't take you over the gender line. No, they won't take you over the gender line. I had to crawl over the gender line. Are you a boy or are you a girl?
Bravo. Thank you so much for that, Sid. You sounded fantastic.
Thank
Oh,
you.
so good. The album is called Walking Through This World, cindybullens.com. It's available everywhere and there it is. And I've been listening to it the last couple of weeks and it's a really, really solid record. And we're going to talk more about that shortly. But first, and again, what the clock is ticking. So I'm going to start to give you like winks or something so we
Okay,
can
but
get
can I
through these
say
questions.
thank you for having me, and thank you to
No,
who've
yes,
joined
absolutely.
us. You know, and I just want to say that I see a ton of friends saying hello here, and I can't say hello to all of you individually, but wow, it's fantastic to see some old friends on there.
Well, this is
Okay, I'm done.
awesome. All
Absolutely.
right. So, question number one, Mr. Bullens. Can you unpack your Maine history, like just so we're all on the same page? We know you're, or some of us know you're from Massachusetts, but what? Tell us your whole Maine story.
Well, I first, my grandmother's from Maine. My grandparents had a house in Kennebunkport on Goose Rock's Beach, and my mother's, that was my father's side. My mother's side had relatives and used to go to Chebeague Island. So every summer from the time I was born, I spent July in Goose Rocks on Goose Rocks Beach and August on Chebeague Island. So Maine was just in my blood from the time I was born, and I always knew that I was going to end up in Maine. And when I say end up, I didn't know I was going to move there 30 years ago. I thought I'd retire or something in Maine. But and I went to New York, went to Los Angeles, stuff like that after high school, and got my career going and so on, and then got married and moved back to Connecticut. I've spent my whole life in Maine off and on, and have lived there for 30 years until I got married, and my wife spent the winter of 2017 and 18 in my house in Portland. And that was the third coldest winter on record, if you remember. And she said when her eyelashes froze, that was the end of it. So we moved after that for a minute and a half to New Mexico, where she's from, and then now we're in Nashville because it's halfway in between, and I have friends and she has friends, and I need to do music, even though I moved right in the middle of the pandemic. But I still have a house on North Haven Island, which is my favorite place in the world, and I will be there. And I'll be in Maine on Monday, so like I said, I'm never too
Fantastic.
far away.
All right. So speaking of music, thank you for that perfect segue. And there's there's so much I want to get into, but we should probably start from the early days. When did you first start playing guitar and writing songs? And who were your influences? What did you listen to growing up?
I started playing guitar around 10 or 11 years old, and I stole my brother's guitar. He had an old silver tone for double F hole for any of you guitar people out there. And I just took it out of his room and started kind of seeing what I could. I don't read music. I even to this day I barely know what chords I play, but I started just putting my fingers on the strings and seeing what sounded good. And then I would watch other musicians on television. I grew up in the age of the 60s and 70s of music, so there are a lot of music TV shows on, with bands from the 60s and 70s. And I would just listen and go back to my guitar and figure it out. But I really was influenced. I'm talking about Toddlership by Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis Presley. And because I have an older brother and older sister, my sister was 8 years older, my brother's 5 years older, and they had records. And I can remember being a toddler, literally, and like it was just that was what I was going to do. I remember saying to my mother or somebody when I was 4, I'm going to be a rock and roll star, because it was that. So that's my earliest influence. And then for me musically, it was, I'm going to sound obvious, but the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. It was also the soul, the Stax Volt and the Atlantic Records people, the soul people. Even though I'm not a soul singer, it was that kind of energy that I was attracted to. And then later on, or a little after that, it was I really got a lot of lyrical and chordal ideas from Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and Nash. And those guys, when they came in, I say guys, the broad spectrum. um, Joni Mitchell was probably the only woman who I was really, really, really in love with in terms of her music and her chords and her tunings on the guitar and her. I taught myself how to play piano because I wanted to play like Joni Mitchell. I wanted to hear those chords. And her lyrics were stunning and still are. I mean, we talked before we came on about the Blue album, and that is one of my favorite albums of all time. You know, I could drink a case of you and still be on my feet has got to be one of the greatest lines of all. And anyway, so those are my early influences, and still are to this day, really.
Well, that's an impressive list. Now, I hope you don't mind. I hope you don't mind. If you know nothing else about me, know that I love a good pun.
I hope you don't mind.
That I ask you, it was like one fortuitous day in 1970 something, you happened to have an encounter with Sir Elton John, which changed kind of the course of your musical trajectory in a lot of ways.
Changed my life.
How'd you meet him? Yeah. Tell us about the tours that,
All right. There's an iconic story, which, and by the way, I just wrote the first 4 chapters of my memoir. So look for that next year because
Great, we will.
Hopefully. And that's not easy because you have to tell things you really don't want to tell. But anyway, about me, not about anybody else. It's not a tell-all. But anyway, this is an iconic story, and it's in all of, anybody who ever interviews me gets this story because it's true. I crashed a party in 1975, September of 75, where in a recording studio in Los Angeles. I had just moved there a little while beforehand, but I had gotten to know these guys who owned this recording studio, Cherokee Recording, and I used to hang out there, and I'd get coffee for people and all that stuff. Once in a while, I'd be brought in to sing on a group background vocal and stuff. So it was kind of the beginning of my getting around in LA as a singer. And I was told a couple of days before that there was going to be a press party for Neil Sedaka. For those of you who don't know, he was an early 50s, 60s, I can't remember. Anyway, he had a comeback and he in the 70s, and he was on Rocket Records, which was co-founded by Elton John. And so there was a press party in this studio, and I knew that Elton was going to be there because the owners of the studio was told, and I thought I'm going. So I'm sitting in the control room with the owners and with other people, and we're not invited into the press party. And one moment, and this is, being young and clueless, I turned to them and I said, I'm going in. And they said, no, you can't go in. You can't go in there. It's a private party. I said, I'm going in. And I opened the studio door and I walked in. I headed straight for the food because I figured if I had, a piece of food and a glass of something in my hand, walked there and kind of stood in the middle of the room hoping. I think I walked up to somebody, some guy, and I thought maybe I can find some connection because I'd done a few things by then. And we did find a connection. And so I started talking, and the next thing I know, I see Elton John. I'm pointing for those of you who can't see me. I don't know. I guess everybody can see me, but I see him out of the corner of my eye heading toward me. And I thought, oh, he's going to kick me out. Well, we all know that Elton would not have been the one to kick me out, but I didn't know that. So he comes walking up, and the guy I'm talking to moves away. And Elton says to me these words, I don't believe we've met yet. I'm Elton John. And of course, I was this huge fan. I mean, he was already in 1975 an icon, already. And all I remember saying was, my name is Cindy. And I don't remember anything else we said. I really don't. And we talked for a while, and then not too long, I don't know, 5 minutes. And then somebody came and took him away. And a few minutes later, a woman walks up to me, a young woman, and she says, "What do you do?" Because nobody kicked me out. So I'm still there, And the woman walks up and says, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, in my cocky voice, I'm a singer." Meanwhile, that's what I wanted to be. And she said, "Oh," and we talked for a minute. She goes away and nobody kicks me out. So then a few minutes later, she walks back up to me and she says, "What are you doing for the next 2 months?" And I was like, "I don't know why." And she said, "Elton wants to know if you want to go on the road with him." That was a Wednesday night, September 17th, 1975.
He had not heard you sing at this point.
Thursday.
Incredible.
Thursday, a limo pulls up at my flea bag, cockroach-ridden, no bathroom door apartment off of Laurel Canyon Boulevard with the orange shag rug. And the guy hands me, and even by that time, Elton had a stack of albums. He made album after album after album from 70 to 75, 69 actually to 75. Anyway, so the guy hands me the stack. Now, mind you, the rehearsals start Friday. So I meet him on a Wednesday. Thursday, I get all the albums. Of course, I knew a lot of the songs, but I didn't know my parts or anything. And Friday, I walk into this big, huge airplane hangar, and there's his band, Davy Johnstone and, Caleb Quay and, all the people who were playing, his manager and everything. So it turns out, I'll just tell this little caveat of how he hired me and then decided, okay, we're going to try it. We're going to try her. I was a her, for those of you who haven't figured that one out. So it turns out that the woman who walked up to me in the press party was Connie Pappas. Her sister was Renee Pappas, who was married to Jerry Wexler, the great producer who founded Atlantic Records with Ahmet Ertegun and discovered Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin. And I had met Jerry Wexler with Bob Crew, another producer. And so Connie found out from Jerry that I, could sing. And so they kept me. And actually, I found out later, way later, that they fired somebody to hire me, which I thought was really good. So anyway, the best part of that story is that Elton John and I are still really close friends. And he's
Incredible.
Been a huge support of my life.
The best part of that story was actually every single word of that story.
It's true. It's all true. I mean, Elton and I have talked about it. And because at one point years later, I thought, am I like not making it up that he walked up to me, but just how it all happened. And he said, no, that's how it happened. That's right.
Phenomenal. So so that was 19, what year was that? Did you tell me?
75.
All right. So 3 years later,
Mm-hmm.
a movie came out, tiny little film. It was kind of a flop. It's called Grease. And
actually 2 years later.
Oh, 2 years. Yeah. Okay. And the
77.
Right. Cause I get that. I always confuse that with Saturday Night Fever as far as what movie came out, what years from the Travolta thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the soundtrack actually was released, I read just today, 2 months before it. So for those of you who don't know, Sid has 3 songs on the Grease soundtrack. So the question is, because we could talk a lot about that, but please tell me more, pun intended, about how it is you got to be asked on that soundtrack, and where did the recording sessions take place, and what was that experience like?
Okay, so that's another whole story.
Of course
but,
it is.
Well, not quite as compelling, but so I went on the road with Elton for 3 tours over 2 years, 75 and 76. And when I got home, I had been on the road with Elton, and I had, a lot more, visibility, let's put it that way. But I had also been working with Bob Crew, who, for those of you who don't know, was a huge and one of the first independent record producers. He wrote and produced all the Four Seasons hits, Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, a lot of 60s hits, early, in fact, from the mid 50s to the mid 70s, he was really, really, but his 60s were his golden years. And I had met him working in, was working in a gas station. I won't tell you that. I have stories. That's why I'm writing my memoir. But anyway, so Bob Crew knew me, and he called me up one day. I was home. He called me up one day and he said, I have this friend who called me and asked me if anybody could sing in a little girl voice. This is ironic, right? A little girl voice for a session they're doing. I mean, I knew nothing. They told me nothing. He told me nothing.
Wow.
And he knew, because I had done some singing with Bob on records, background vocals on the Four Seasons and stuff later on, the 70s Four Seasons. You know, that I could sing in a very, I can't do it now, but, you know, a very kind of little girlish voice. And so I went to the studio, I can't remember exactly what studio, but it was in Hollywood, and it might have been Sound Factory in Hollywood. And you could probably look on the album and see what the thing is, but the studio is. And it was in 1977. I don't remember exactly what month it was, but I went in and they asked me to sing. I think I sang "Raining on Prom Night" first, and you know, it's raining on prom night. Of course, I can't do that little girl voice now, like I said. So after I did that, they said, "Oh, that's great. Would you mind doing another one?" And I said, "No, that's fine." Now, meanwhile, I think I'm getting $90 for singing backgrounds. Well,
Right.
no, I sing, you know, a session is $90. I sing "Raining on Prom Night." Then they have me singing "Freddie, My Love." Then they have me singing the duet with Louis St. Louis called "Mooning." So I do the 3 songs, and it ends up that I'm singing 3 lead vocals, and my name is as big as Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, and I think Frankie Valli did one, and you know, Channing, what's her name?
Stalker.
Yes, Stockard Channing, and suddenly I'm part of the phenomena of the Grease movie soundtrack. There's more to that story, but I won't tell it right now.
Which got nominated, did not win, but got nominated for a Grammy.
It got nominated for a Grammy, and that was my first Grammy nomination, and which was 77, but happened in 78. And then I got nominated for my own record.
Super segue.
That one, yes.
You are crushing my segues for me. 1980. This is the debut album from then Cindy Bullens called Desire Wire. Can you talk to us about getting signed, releasing that album, which got nominated for a Grammy, which is tremendous? Please unpack that for us.
Yeah. So yeah, I did the Grease movie soundtrack. I had been on the road with Elton. I got management, you know, I got, you know, all the stuff that goes along with that stuff, because in the back of all the background singing I did, and I did a lot, you know, after Elton, I did a lot of studio background singing for people, and you know, I'm on it. I don't even remember how many records I'm on, but back in the 70s, you know, somebody will say, "Oh, you were on so-and-so," and I'll go, "Really?" And I have to kind of look it up in the allmusic.com. But anyway, so I was doing a lot of work, but I was still writing I mean, I really just wanted to be, I wanted to be still at that point, and I use the term rock and roll star, which is long gone for me, but back in those days, that's what I wanted to be. And so I was writing. I had a grand piano that I bought from Cherokee Studios after I was on the road with Elton, which is living in North Haven right now. And, so I bought a grand piano and I had all my guitars, and I was still writing. I was writing my own songs, and I finally started, you know, getting into a groove where I felt like I was writing some really catchy, good songs. And mind you, being on the road with Elton John is an education. It's an education.
That's going to be 3 chapters of the book
with Elton John. Yeah, the book opens actually with he comes in the fourth chapter. But anyway, so far we don't know yet. But yes, it's an education, and I learned so much about not just being on the road and being a performer and how to work an audience, but the way the structure of songs and what catches people and what doesn't and all that. I also learned a lot from Bob Crew, who wrote a lot of hits, and other people. But anyway, so I was writing my own, and I came up with about 3 or 4 songs that I thought were record worthy finally. And I got I got a record deal with United Artists, and the story of that, though, is very sad to me because the album came out. The single was Survivor, which anybody who knows my history, people who are old like me and who listen to Boston radio because they played the crap out of it on WBCN and other places. And that was my single, which led to the Grammy nomination and all that. And it was flying up the charts, the Hot 100 charts on Billboard. And the record company got sold to EMI, which is a big conglomerate.
Right.
And I got lost in the shuffle.
Which is a story I've heard too many times.
And so the record was really, and I was getting reviews for that record, because don't forget back then, and sometimes when I say this, I feel like I'm tooting my own horn or something, or there's something else behind it, but there isn't. I was a woman rocker back then, playing my own guitar, singing my own songs, and basically producing my own records, writing my own songs. And there, other than in the folk world, of course, there was Linda Ronstadt and Joni Mitchell, and Bonnie Raitt, even, who's is a dear friend of mine back then, but she was more in the folk blues category, not on the Hot 100. And there weren't any. There was Fanny, who was kind of over here, Susie Quattro, who was just coming out.
Pat Benatar?
No,
not even pre.
She came out after me. And that's another story. But and I was androgynous too, meaning that no one could tell if I was a boy or a girl, which is ultimately why, what was part of my attraction, I think, to people was that nobody could tell. And so anyway, so I couldn't, it was tough for me back then to get re-signed, which I did, and made another album. But that's when I got re-signed to Casablanca album, and they were doing all this disco thing with Donna Summer, and they did have Kiss, and I saw their Kiss's first showcase ever.
No way.
Yes, I did. And so the owner of Casablanca loved me, and then he left. This is my story. And the new president came in, and he said, "We don't want you to write your songs. We don't want you to produce your own records. We want you to sound more like Pat Benatar, who had come out and had Hit Me With Your Best Shot." And I said, "You want Pat Benatar? You go sign Pat Benatar." And I walked out of the office. And I didn't make another record for 10 years. So I got married and had kids. So, that's the way it went back then. And because, he literally said to me, and this is in my show for anybody who's seen my one-person show, "We want you to wear tank tops and dangly earrings. See my uniform? Black t-shirt. I've got jeans on. I happen to have my red sneakers on, but when I perform, I wear boots. And this is it. This is my uniform. It's been my uniform forever and ever. Once in a while, I wear a shirt. Usually it's a t-shirt and jeans, and that's been it since I was 4 years old, And I don't wear dangly earrings. I didn't as a woman. I don't now. I didn't wear makeup as a woman. I didn't. And now people can finally go, oh, I get it. But, and if you don't get it, I'm happy to talk to you about it afterwards. Email me. And so that's what happened. But Desire Wire is still the iconic album of mine from those days.
Well, you've opened the door to a question that's later on my list, but this seems like the logical time. So, I mean, you're describing, sexism in the music industry is a whole other like 1,000-hour conversation. The good news is we're not going to have that right now. But one of the questions that a reader submitted, which I thought was really interesting, is, it might sound cliche, but coming from a genuine place, you've been Sid Bullens for a decade now, and has it impacted like the way that your music and you are treated as a male performer versus as a female performer? What have you noticed?
I'm going to be very honest.
Please.
Not much.
Okay.
And the reason not much is because I haven't been out there that much as Sid. Don't forget, oh, you didn't know this, so I bet that's just a term of a phrase. So I started transitioning 9.5 years ago.
Okay.
And at that time, I was performing. I was performing as Cindy, and I was performing the songs from Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth, the album about my daughter's death, and I had made 2 other albums before after that. And I was touring, and I had an agent, and I was doing that whole thing. And I was in the Refugees, who I mentioned before we came on, with Wendy Waldman and Deborah Holland, 3 women doing Crosby, Stills, and Nash type, our own songs. But that's what we were compared to, because it was 3-part harmony. And then I started transitioning, and not everybody knew. I changed my name to Cidny in October of 2011. And for like a year, I was saying, okay, am I not? Am I not? Am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? Am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? And slowly I said, yes, I'm going to do this, because if I don't, meaning transition, because I'm old enough. I was 60 years old at that point. And I knew that I had to address this core issue of mine that I had never addressed before, and you have to go to, back then you had to go to therapy and do all kinds of doctor stuff and everything. I don't think you have to do that today, but you did back then. And but I was still on the fence about going all the way with it, except for changing my name. But I did within 9 months. And then once I did decide to go all the way, and I was doing the testosterone, and I was, had some surgery and, whatever. It was really difficult, because half the people, because I didn't look like Sid. Well, I didn't look the way I look now. It took me 7 years to grow a mustache, and, so I looked like Cindy, but I was Sid, but I wasn't yet I didn't know who I was going to be. So I said to the Refugees by September of 12, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not doing this. I can't do it. I have to fall back. And I went home to Maine. I got a job at LL Bean, and I worked in the warehouse of LL Bean for 3 years. And then I also worked at the YMCA up in Freeport. Some people on here may have seen me in there, because I worked as a personal trainer at the YMCA. And I just stayed. And thank God for both of those places. Both of those places were so supportive of me. The YMCA and LL Bean were of Southern Maine were completely inclusive. They were supportive. LL Bean didn't know me beforehand, but the Y people did. And I hid and then I wrote my show, and then I started to come out, and the show was my bridge. The one-person show, Somewhere Between Not an Ordinary Life, in 2016. I know it sounds like a long time, but I wrote the show, and I premiered it in 2016 and did it for 2 years. And so the reason I'm telling all of that is because I'm not a guy musician. I'm Cindy/Cidny Bullens. I'm just me. So when I go out and play, most of the people who are going to come, well, I haven't played since the pandemic, but when I did start playing, and don't forget I was mostly doing my show. I didn't make an album for 10 years until this year. I mean, in last year.
Yeah.
And it came out in August of 2020. So I was only, the performances I was really doing, other than a charity event once in a while, was my one person show, which explained the whole thing. And so I don't know. It's going to be, it's not like a 20-year-old, who's going to have a whole career and have somebody treat them differently. So that's the long version, but I really don't know. I do know, let me say this. I'll cap that story off with this. And it's another sad place for the world, in my view. This album is the best album I've made since Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth in 1999, about my daughter. I wrote it after my daughter's death, which was a soul album and a themed album. This album is a themed album, more loose, and of course not as profound, but it is about my life for the last 9 years. And although it's still commercial and you wouldn't know it, and except for the first song I played, The Gender Line, you wouldn't know that it's about my transition, probably, except for a few little hidden lines and The Gender Line, that song. When I started to pitch this album, which has gotten great reviews and front page of the Washington Post, the whole deal, a movie made about it, about me, and a whole bunch of stuff. Not one record company would touch me because they didn't want to talk about the story. They didn't want to have another subject. They didn't want to be asked, well, isn't Cidny Bullens transgender? They didn't want to go there. And so I put it out myself. And that was kind of crushing to me, because not crushing, I shouldn't use that word, but it was very disappointing, because I was like, people are going to want to tell this story. I had just finished doing my one person show, which also got great reviews and was sold out all the time. And people heard my human story, from meeting Elton John and Bob Crew all the way to my grandchildren and everything in between, getting married, living in Westport, Connecticut, having children, losing one, the aftermath of that, and my life as a grandparent, I mean, and so, and the press wanted to write about that. They were interested in that story. And like I said, there was a film made about my life because it's an interesting story. Not the record industry, not the music industry.
You're right. That is very depressing, because the songs are so good.
They didn't want to touch it. So I released it myself, and it got great press. There's my co-producer, Ray Kennedy, says you've got to re-release it. We've got to, and that's another story, and we won't go into all of that. I did it for me, just like I did Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth for me. I didn't do it as a commercial album. It came out as a commercial album, and it was my biggest selling one, Somewhere Between, unfortunately, because and it still sells to this day for horrible reasons, but and some good, but it was a different album. And so I make albums for myself, apparently, and whoever gets to hear them, and they're good. The musicians alone on this album, all from Nashville, and they play with everybody you've ever heard of. Oh my friggin' God. And Ray Kennedy, who produced Lucinda Williams, is produced her last new album, and Steve Earle and Rodney Crowell, and he's one of my best friends for the last 20 years, and he's a magical sound person. He's a sound magician. And it's ear candy. This album is ear candy. Forget the songs. The songs are good. Yeah. I wrote the songs. They're good. But the ear candy on this album, even I go, oh my God, that is so cool. The musicians are just amazing. So, but it sits with me now. And, and yeah, some radio stations have played it, and I've, but that Amsel has been, it's not about being female or male. It's about being transgender. And people don't understand it, and there's no reason why they should. It's not about understanding. It's about accepting. People don't have to understand it. People who came to see my show would go, oh, I get it now, but in a way of understanding my journey, and and how it's affected my life from the time I was born. But it doesn't mean you have to like get it and say, oh yeah, now I get it. And whatever. I mean, it's my experience and I don't expect you to understand it fully, but it's real. It exists. It's real. It's our kids, my grandkids, they're like, my grandmother is a trans man. My grandmother has a mustache. I mean, they don't care. They're going to grow up not caring. My 23-year-old stepdaughter, she doesn't care. She loves it. She gets to tell all her friends that her mother's married to a trans man, and it's like a cool thing, So it's just us old people and people who are not willing to dig a little deeper.
Are you hopeful? I mean, here in 2021?
I'm much more hopeful now than I have been, that I was for the last 4 years, and not to get into anything political, but
you can say whatever you want.
Even now, the trans people are being vilified. And let me say one more thing about this. I could stand beside Mitch McConnell in the men's room washing our hands. I can't stand beside him in a urinal. So just so you get that straight. I could stand beside him washing our hands in the restroom of the Capitol, and he wouldn't know that I had been born female. So, but it's not trans men that people are afraid of. It's trans women. It's men. And God, I have so much sympathy and empathy for men, older men. And when I say older, I mean past 20, 25, because once if you're 17 or 18, you have an easier time because I'm making generalizations, because you're not fully formed. But men who decide at 40 years old or 50 years old that they know that they are women in a woman in a man's body, and they transition, more often than not, it's very difficult, and there's something about them. And I am generalizing here. So please, you can email me and tell me I'm full of crap. But this I happen to know. So it's trans women that men, old white men, are afraid of. Not trans men, because they don't know. I've stood in the restroom. I've been in the restroom of Fenway Park. I've been in the restroom at Patriot Stadium, at Gillette. You think any man would know that I'm not a man? No, they don't have a clue. They're hitting me up because you can hear through the loudspeakers if somebody hits a home run or has a touchdown, and they go, hitting me in the thing, in the ribs. They don't know. So I'm invisible, in the real world, in the big world. So nobody, unless you're going to come to my house or come to my show or come to whatever, because you know that I'm transgender and you hate transgender people and you want to threaten me, you won't know. So people are afraid of what they don't know about and what they don't understand, and the other, somebody who's the other. But it's really, I have much more empathy for, now I'm not talking about let me just divide here. I can stop, but I'm not talking about the act of transitioning, because that's a whole nother conversation.
Mhm.
It's brutal. It was brutal for me, and it's brutal for any trans man or trans woman. I'm talking about after you've transitioned and what people are afraid of or don't understand.
Well,
Right. I'm
I think that
off
the
my
fact that you're
soapbox now.
speaking so eloquently about it is only helping, and to have these kinds of conversations is critically important.
And let me say one
know.
thing. My friend Becky Bardovics, who I love, hi Becky, from North Haven, just said two spirits is important to understand. And let me just say that the indigenous people from all over the world, not just Native Americans, but native indigenous people from South America, Africa, wherever else, revered two-spirit people. There were some indigenous tribes that had 5 genders. 5. So it's us. It's the European old white. Not that there aren't other colors who don't understand who being transgender, but we it's that same old thing. So anyway, thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Sid, for taking so much time to talk about that. Now, the clock, we're almost out of time, and we're definitely going to squeeze in one more song. Okay. There's a couple of people they're in the chat asked questions, and I think I'm just going to pick one. I thought this was a good one. I mean, I think they're all good, but unfortunately, the clock is working against us. Let's see. So Kathy wants to know, hi, Sid, what's the best advice you've ever been given regarding your music or otherwise? Like, is there a piece of advice that a nugget you would like to bestow upon us before ending with a song?
Jeez. What's her name? Who asked it?
It's Kathy? Kathy.
Kathy, for crying out loud. The best advice I've ever gotten was to hang in there, basically. Don't give up. And I know that sounds really obvious. And believe me, I have thought of giving up more than I probably thought about going on. But it really is. You have to be tenacious in this business. And you also have to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. That probably has to do with everything. But in music, you have to really get to know what your genius is. And I use that word in terms of, and what you're just okay at. And you go with what you're really good at. Maybe you're really good at performing. Maybe you're really good at singing. Maybe you're really good at songwriting. And if you're not so good at one of those, concentrate on the one you really are the best at.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for spending your Tuesday night listening to Cidny Bullens weave his tales. There's so much more. We just got to the tip of the iceberg, but the good news is he's writing a book. So we're going to have that to look forward to. And I can't wait because I know you'll send me an advance copy, my new best friend. We would love it. On behalf of everyone who's on this Zoom right now, and it's a couple hundred of us, we would really love it if you could close us out with one more song from your record.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Portland Press Herald. Thank you, Amesel. Thank you, everybody who contributed to this. And thank you all out there for coming from all over the place, and my friends and people I don't know. My website is up there, cidnybullens.com. Email me. I love hearing from people. And this song, I have to give one little shout out. This song was inspired by a painting by Maine painter Kate Chappell. She is in Kennebunkport. She had this wonderful painting called Healing the Break, and it resonated with me because it's reminded me of my daughter, Jessie. And I wrote this song for her painting, and I recorded it on this album. So it's called Healing the Break. I'm holding my own. I'm doing all right. I'm finding my way through this curious life. I don't understand, not even a clue. But some days I think I do. I felt this before when the sun comes up, lending its light to the day. When breathing comes easy and worry fades away. It's all about healing the break. It's all about healing the break. I forgot the second verse. A part of me is broken. There's no doubt of that. But like weeds in the sidewalk, life grows in the cracks. I'm not much on wishing for magical things, but one sweet little red bird keeps flapping her wings. I felt this before when the sun comes up, lending its light to the day. When breathing comes easy and worry fades away. It's all about healing the break. It's all about healing the break. Healing the break.
Yay!
Thank you so much,
Yay.
everybody.
Thank you so much, Sid.
Wow, I got people on there I haven't seen in a long time. It's been great. Thank you, Amsel. It's been wonderful.
Pleasure all mine. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out.
Please visit me on my website. Let me know that you were on here, and be fun. And I'll see you in Maine in a week. I'm fully vaccinated, so I can come.
Nice.
All right. Thank you.